So let's say I have a session in Pro Tools, or I have a session in Logic, or I have a session in Ableton, and I want to import it into musescore. So first, what I need to do is I need to essentially have all my Midi. In this case, what I'll try and do with Midi notes is ensure that I'm not getting a whole lot of overlap. So if I check these notes, what I don't want is a lot of notes ringing out over each other, especially if they're supposed to be monophonic voices. So things like this here, where these voices are ringing out over the top of each other, they're going to cause issues. So I would trim these back to not get the issue I would have in musescore. If musescore sees lots of overlapping notes, it presumes that you're trying to play multiple notes at a time, so it gives multiple voices, which results in things like rests where you don't expect rests, notes happening kind of again and again, or like a real confused looking score. So if I've checked through my score and I've checked that I'm minimizing those, or I have very little of those, what I'll do next is export. So if I have this here, so I have my loop, I have my piano, I have some other kind of effects in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to File, Export, and I want all MIDI tracks as a MIDI file. And then I'm going to say put this on my desktop. And then I'm ready to open up musescore. With musescore, it's actually really simple. So let's say I don't even need a new score. Let's cancel this. I have a blank score. I can take my MIDI file and just drag and drop it. And see here, once I drag and drop it, I give this plus sign. So what that's going to do at the moment is it's going to give me this import. So I haven't imported it yet. If I go down through, it's saying, here's all the tracks you had. I've set all of the sounds to grand piano. Here's the musescore instrument that's actually going to play. So I could go in and change that. I go in and edit it. But I might want to go through things and go, okay, what's actually the maximum note value I have? So the maximum note value I'm using for the most part is 8 notes or 16 notes. I can minimize that. So I actually have 16 notes in this piece, so that's okay. The maximum number of voices for each of my channels. So the very first one is my piano. So that has 4 voices. But I know that my other instruments down the bottom are kind of melodic instruments. So outside of my piano and my bass hit, I can change everything to a single voice, and this will help somewhat. So let's set these to single voices. If I know I haven't used duplets, so triplets, quadruplets, quintlets, septlets, or nunlets, I will take those out. If I've used a MIDI or a human performance, I would tick that so that musescore knows to not try and be super precise with it. And I would turn off things like note clef changes. So that means I won't get any note clef changes as it moves through the piece. Yeah. So what I can do now is I hit apply and I can test my piece. So there's one channel here, this instrument, where this starts with instrument 5. Instrument 5 has multiple voices in it. So I go back and change this to 1. I've missed some of these. And now if I hit apply, I'm going to lose some of those weird extra rests that I had to make things more difficult or more difficult to read. That simplifies how it looks just a little bit more. So I'm not getting extra rests. So if I Command Z to undo that, or where's the instrument 5? Put instrument 5 back to 4 voices, and we follow instrument 5 here. Let's say apply that. Instrument 5. You can see we're getting rests on top of notes and notes underneath rests, and it becomes difficult to read. So it's really important with something like that where there should only be one voice to apply that into one voice, and that simplifies out my pattern. It makes it much easier to read. If I want to go further with this, I could then go in and say, I could view my mixer and I could pick each of these. So instrument 2, what is instrument 2 supposed to be? I can change that sound and go, that's actually supposed to be closer to an acoustic bass or a fingered bass, and change that sound. So if I solo that and hop into a point where it's playing, and that gets closer to what I expect. Let's stop that here. The next one was a marimba, so I can do the same thing. I can select that instrument. I can change the name, of course, and I can change the sound. So let's look for something like a marimba, and let's try listen to that. And then I will probably get that sound a bit closer to what I intended. The next line was originally a violin, so I can swap to a violin sound. Again, changing the name if I need. Have a... And that gives me an approximation or closer to what I had or used in Logic. And then I would just need to do a cleanup. So something here like this with this bass, it's being shown in the bass clef, but it's huge amount of leisure lines, which makes it very, very difficult to read. So what I might do is go back to the start, go back to the first place where that hit, and then use my clef symbols. And I go, okay, what happens if I go to an octave down bass clef at that point? And it puts it to a more legible or more readable point. And that will continue for the whole duration of it. Or what happens if this violin is quite high and that's difficult to read? I can, of course, put this an octave up on the clef, and all of a sudden the clef is a whole lot more legible. Normally, if I see things like accidentals, they can be a worry. But in the case kind of we have here, it's the same accidental happening again and again. So we have 3 flats, which are in the key of C minor, for example, and it's the same flat happening again and again, which is indicating to me we're in our harmonic minor. We're getting an A natural on our G chord. So that's telling me I can kind of correct that and polish it up a bit. So I can export it as a MIDI file from my DAW. I import it into musescore. I have to adapt the sounds, or adapt it here. What are my quantization? How many voices are there? Did I use tuplets? So triplets, quadruplets, etc. Is it a human performance? Am I okay with the clef changing in the middle of the bar? Or anything else that might change exactly how it's placed. So if you've put groove or swing, you might want to detect that as well. And then I just need to clean it up if there are any issues. So I can use my clefs to do that, to make that much easier to read. And then I can use my mixer to rename things and to change the sound it's playing. And I can get that a little closer to what was intended.